This is the first Solocast of mine for 2026. A Solocast is where you don't have to listen for too long, maybe up to 10 minutes or so, just to get an idea. I'm just going to talk you through just some thinking that I've been doing and writing about, so you can take away something practical in a really short amount of time and perhaps go and use that. This Solocast was triggered by a speech that a lot of people have been talking about recently that happened in January 2026. It was Mark Carney's speech at Davos. If you're not sure who Mark Carney is, he's the Prime Minister of Canada. And he was speaking at the World Economic Forum, and his speech really rocked the world. And there's a lot of people who were applauding his message. And I'm not going to talk about the geopolitical stuff and what it all means, because that's for someone else way more informed than me. But I do want to speak about the way in which he delivered his speech and the lessons that we can take as leaders that we can carry from that. For a long time, I have taught leaders at all levels a really simple framework, which is something if you want to try to remember what is a leader here to do, this framework I think can really help just cut through the noise and move away from all the competencies and lists of things we need to be able to do. It's a really simple framework. It's 3 words: see, imagine, and do. And if I was to add a few more words, it's around seeing what is, the reality of things, imagining what could be, what's possible, and then doing what it takes. And in Carney's speech, all of those 3 behaviours, lenses, if you like, were present. And I just want to talk through his speech, and I'll put a link to the transcript and also the video so you can check it out and follow along for yourself. But let me just talk you through it. So let's start with seeing what is. Carney began by naming reality with an unflinching honesty. He said, "Let me be direct. We're in the midst of a rupture, not a transition." And there was no hedging, there was no diplomatic softening, just clear-eyed truth-telling in that message. He used Václav Havel's, who is the former president of the Czech Republic, his greengrocer metaphor brilliantly. The shopkeeper who puts the sign in his window saying, "Workers of the world unite." And the shopkeeper puts it there not because he believes it, but instead to avoid trouble. And Havel calls this living within a lie. And Carney's point is that for decades, countries like Canada have placed their own signs in the window, pretending that the rules-based international order worked as advertised. But there was a fiction, and that fiction no longer holds. You can't live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination. There's a lot of uns in it, but you get the point. He is spelling out what is in a different way. And this is what the C practice is all about. Relentlessly seeking to be accurate rather than right or have your point be the winning point. He's trying to get to accuracy and telling it as it is, not what we wish were true. All right, let's talk about imagine. Remember, it's see, imagine, do. This is the second one, imagine. And it's about imagining what could be. So Carney named this harsh reality, and he could have stopped there. Plenty of leaders do. They see the problems clearly, but they don't offer a compelling alternative. And I reckon we've all been guilty of that. We've had a bit of this is really hard or this is broken, but we don't offer a better future. We don't suggest something different that's more compelling. Carney's not like that. And he said, from the fracture, we can build something bigger, better, stronger, or more just. And he painted this vision of middle powers refusing to compete for favour from great powers and instead combining to form a third path with impact. There's this imagine bit right there. And this vision, it wasn't naive multilateralism or something nostalgic. It's pragmatic and compelling, which is, I reckon, what we want visions to be. You know, he came up with different combinations of nations tackling different challenges based on shared values and interests. You know, he was painting a picture that we can go, oh yeah, this is what it could look like. Now, rather than fixating on what might go wrong, he invited the audience to co-create something better. And this reminds me of another great podcast. It's called Possible by Reid Hoffman, who's the co-founder of LinkedIn and known as the philosopher of Silicon Valley. Brilliant podcast where he talks about all the things that could go right if things broke humanity's way, rather than all the things that could go wrong. So give that a listen. Put a link in the notes. So we've talked about see, we talked about imagine, and the third one is do. Do what it takes. And Carney at this point shifted from inspiration to implementation. He said, we're taking the sign out of the window. And then he backed it up with specifics. Talked about tax cuts, removal of trade barriers, $1 trillion in strategic investments, doubling defence spending, etc., etc. So giving some here's what we need to do. And this isn't about being busy. It's not about busy work. It's about being deliberate and creating leveraged action towards that compelling vision. And it gets rid of us just being busy for busy's sake, which I think when we're in this do mode, a lot of us can, right, let's put the pedal down. But I think what's more important is go, what are the key actions? They don't have to all happen now, but this is the stuff we need to decide to do to create that vision. And it's a long game a lot of the time. So we're not talking about frantic activity. It's about being strategic and focused. He also said nostalgia is not a strategy. And true leadership requires doing what it takes, not lamenting what's been lost. And I think he's an exemplar of saying, here's where we are, here's where we could be, and here's what we need to do. See, imagine, do. I reckon the whole speech works because he embodies all three practices in sequence. He sees reality and he spells it out really clearly. He imagines a compelling alternative and he shares that with us. And then he says, here's the tangible things that we can do. And I reckon that's a pattern, that see, imagine, do pattern, that leaders who are really effective, whether they know it or not, build into their daily conversations. It doesn't have to be giving a speech. It could be working with your team and making sure that we explore all three elements of that. It could be a one-on-one conversation, having a coaching conversation with someone to explore those things. All three need to be there for it to be effective. So a question for you as we wrap this up, and remember I'll put links into the show notes of all of this stuff as well, so you can check it all out. But the question for you, which of these practices do you reckon you've got nailed? And which of the ones of see, imagine, do you reckon you might want to experiment with strengthening? And what would be possible if you did that? I'm Digby Scott. This is Dig Deeper. And until next time, go well.